Welcome to Three Witches and a Druid podcast, a Canadian podcast about paganism in today's modern society. And now, Three Witches and a Druid podcast presents The Thieves of Dagdad.
White horses, ladies by the score, all dressed in satin, waiting by the door. Oh, what a lucky man he was. Oh, what a lucky man he was. White lace and feathers, they made up his bed, a gold-covered mattress on which he was led. Oh, what a lucky man he was. Oh, what a lucky man he was. He went to fight wars for this country and his king, of his honor and his glory. The people would sing, oh, what a lucky man he was. Oh, what a lucky man he was. A bullet had found him, his blood ran as he cried. No money could save him, so he laid down and he died.
And welcome to Three Witches and a Druid, where we sit around tonight, coffee table, enjoying a variety of warm and some alcoholic beverages. Unlike other nights, tonight, Druids have taken over the podcast. So I'm Brian.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Karen.
And I have twisted the arms of my wife and best friend.
Oh, I could cry.
Into convincing them to record our first podcast on our brand new recording equipment. So maybe we'll sound better.
Even more professional.
Even more professional than every other time where we've never sounded professional ever.
So, but will that be because of the whole microphone setup or because there is no witches and it's all druids?
That's a burn. That's a burn.
Yeah. There we go. Them's fighting words. Just because I know I'm out of arm's reach from the others.
We're going to get reader mail about this.
Oh, I bet.
Never actually got reader mail. We've gotten comments, but never reader mail. So, for tonight's topic, we thought we would discuss what it is that brought us into Druidry. What it is that, while walking the pagan path, what convinced them that the Druid books were the ones to pick up? What is it that convinced them that seeking out a grove was the right thing? First, tell us who you are.
Oh, my name is Michael Vandenhoek. I am a business owner in rural Nova Scotia from a Dutch immigrant family. Yeah, I don't know. I'm an accountant technically by training and now run a greenhouse operation.
You're also the treasurer of ADF.
Yes, I am also the treasurer for ADF, which is pronounced Arnrechtvein.
Thank you, because I can't do that.
Which is our public pagan church that our grove is a part of. And yeah, it's been funny because since COVID, we've really haven't done any like the public meet and greets or those kind of things. So it's really all of our grove activities have been so, grove only focused.
Or
Zoom. But I mean, it's been such a focus on there from all the people that we already know that I haven't had to tell any of those kind of stories in a long time. So it's kind of interesting going back to that.
Right. And Karen, you tell us who you are.
I'm Brian's wife. and that is largely how I came to the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids.
Voluntarily, though.
Well, yeah. There was some browbeating. No, it was eventually a choice. I've been part of the pagan community for nearly 20 years. I had always thought of myself as being eclectic, but never enjoyed the less organized aspects of some of the other groups and events that I had been to. And I think the big draw to Druidry for me was how organized and structured things were, which gave me a sense of peace. And I know that does not work for everyone, but it was something that helped me a great deal. And once I got in there, I did my dedicate packet. I had to read a whole bunch of wonderful books and some terrible books. And, it just felt like a good path. It was very logical.
I just had to laugh because you're saying 20 years in the pagan community. I'm like, no, that's not possible. And then I'm thinking oh yeah, wait, I'm older than I thought.
Yeah. Much older.
Yeah, because I actually first became a member of ADF in 2005.
Yeah.
So
how old were you when you became a member of ADF? 2005?
I can't do that math quick in my head.
No, we are, well, not me, but you guys are a couple drinks in. No one's doing math at this stage.
We're not that far.
I'm a Meadhorn in, so I mean,
Yours is a big horn.
why? Thank you.
Oh, no.
Wow.
So in terms of who I am, we've already kind of covered that. I've been on the podcast before, but yeah, Brian's wife, member of the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids, part of the pagan community for 20 years. I work in human resources, big into community activity, particularly park cleanups, any type of volunteer activities that involve animals or environmental causes. I like to read. I like to stab things. I recently took up cross-stitching.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Okay, yeah.
as well as stabbing. There are a
That's a
lot
good
of
segue.
patience. I like to camp. I like to shoot my bow. I like to...
You're a bit of a survivalist.
I like to experiment with preserving food, and I have a little pantry. It's good times.
Yeah.
There are many pillars
I
that
guess
make
one
up
of
the
the rules
house.
of being a survivalist, you don't really talk about it unless you have like an A and E.
It's not bloody
Special.
Fight Club, Brian.
Well, in
you
some
still-
ways, because sometimes you
still-
get the looks from people, right?
Yeah, well,
and it's
you
like
also,
Oh yeah,
you're either
100%.
part of the community or you're
You know
not.
what?
you also don't want to tell people where you're stashing.
That's right, because
It's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
some people think you're crazy, and the other ones want to rob you.
Yeah,
You know?
Some of them want to join you.
some of them just wanna be
It's-
you.
It's commune style.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they want to join the bandwagon. We could do a whole podcast just on that.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
gosh,
we
yeah.
will definitely 100% down the road at some point.
What are you talking about?
Doing an episode on survivalism.
No, we don't talk about that.
It's Fight Club. So
Oh,
what
man.
what brought you in? Like, how did you find yourself in the Druid Path?
Ooh, well, long story short, it was in middle school, and I was helping a friend that was really interested in researching Wicca, and I helped him try to find some resources and what we could find of reputable or quasi-reputable resources back in the early days of the internet and the public libraries. Yeah, I helped him kind of navigate through some of those books and some of those resources, and we made our first set of runes together, and just kind of experimented a little bit on the pagan path, and it felt good, but not quite right. And then in amongst that internet research somewhere, I stumbled across ADF, and it was like coming home. It was like the moment I found it, I was like, I'm a druid. Like, that's the title just kind of stuck, or like the label just stuck, and it just felt so right, because living out in rural Nova Scotia, I was always like, I enjoyed reading. I spent most of my time outside. My time was either with my face buried in a book or out amongst the trees. So, I mean, it just called to me. And then after doing a number of, I guess, minor rituals and like little explorations, down the path, and just reading up as much as I could from like the resources that ADF put out there, I guess you could say I had like my religious experience. It was a June night. It was like the middle of June, and we were up on a mountain camping out in, I won't say where, in rural Nova Scotia, and we were having a bonfire, and there was some just crap going. It felt like the end of the world to me in my life, and I called out to the heavens, and I in a very dramatic teenage fashion, just like listed off my problems and spoke angrily into the void. Like, we're talking middle of June, and the sky just opened up, and we had a hailstorm, and the fire just kept burning brightly in the middle of this just thunderous hailstorm in the middle of June, and it just felt so raw and powerful and just part of nature, and that just, I don't know, never looked back ever since.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Mine's a lot more chaotic than that. I
mean, obviously there are a bunch of like winding bits of like the minutia in there, but I mean, that's really, if you come down to how you came to it, like
big
that was
dramatic story.
It was a big dramatic
story.
story.
No, I like that. I was just thinking to myself, sometimes when I tell people I'm Druid, I feel a little pompous. Like, do you ever get that?
Sometimes, like, just whenever I try and explain it, I always expect that the response is going to be like, yeah, I play World of Warcraft too. And then just wait for like those kind of, or Dungeons and Dragons. You just kind of expect that somebody would be like, oh, I totally know what you're talking about. But no, you don't.
I will very often say to people that I'm pagan before I bother explaining that I'm Druid because they have a little bit of an easier time wrapping their heads around that. Or at least that's been my experience. But when I was 14-ish, I had a partner, and we were in a loose coven. We'll call it that. It was a group of people who all came from different backgrounds, and unfortunately the leader of that group passed just over a month ago now. It was absolutely devastating because that woman introduced me to not only paganism, but just general self-acceptance and also the LGBT community. She was able to tell me that it was okay to be who I was, and it didn't matter what other people thought about that, and it was a perfect message at that time in my life. I stayed with that group for a few years. We went to lots of festivals. Sorry, a little choked up.
It's all right. It's all right that you're choked up.
One of the things that always struck me whenever we went to these festivals, or this particular festival, and we've talked about it before on the podcast, APEG, was that everything started at this ridiculous thing called Pagan Standard Time, which drove me bonkers.
Yep.
Because if you told me to be somewhere at 1 o'clock, I would be there at 1:45, and I would wait patiently. And that is just who I am and who I have always been. So to have things start, well after the commencement time.
If it starts at all.
Would take me right out of the moment. As one of my dear friends would say, it puts you in the aisle. If you're watching a movie and you're immersed in the movie, or you're part of the movie, and otherwise you're in the aisle. And so you'd be in the aisle, you'd be removed from that moment. Because I would, find myself in my own head, find myself wondering, why, if my time is not valued, am I here? And that got really frustrating to me. And so after doing, a lot of reading and a lot of exploring, and meeting Brian a few years later, got to know a few people in the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids. It was a lot smaller back then. Now it's grown with the families and new people coming all over the place. The path felt good, and it took me a long time to commit, but then when I did, I never looked back. It was, it just, as you say, it felt like home, felt like family, good support, and, just that structure that was important to me when I go into a practice. You want to know that you've got the comfort of even just a few key phrases, or the structure of a ritual, or practices that we do every year. We've got our own Grove Maypole.
Yeah.
We go camping every year together. What is it? Lunasa?
Yeah, Lunasa.
Yeah. So we have
Druid Fest.
Exactly. But we have traditions now that we've built, and they're structured, they are fun, they are nice.
And they start on time.
And
They do.
Ridiculous, but such a huge factor for me.
It's funny you bring up Pagan Standard Time, because that was one of the first things we established right from the get-go, me, Mark, and Allie, when we first held that first Lunasa ritual we did at APEG. We were going to start on time, and everyone else was, oh no, we got to wait till people gather. We're like, no, our ritual starts at 3 o'clock. It will start at 3 o'clock, not 2:59, not 3:01. It'll start at 3. And we even set it up in such a way that we had to deal with certain factors, and we put people in place to deal with those factors. People arriving late, people dancing in our circle. It's not something we did. And we put someone in charge of those things. And we started at 3 o'clock. And a lot of people at that festival were like, oh my goodness, I'm not ready yet. It's like, get over here, because we've started. You can join 5 minutes in. Doesn't matter. We've already started. And yeah, we've kind of stuck to that ever since.
Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah.
Well, the familiarity in the structure, and I know I know a lot of people don't like that. They like to be free and they like to move. It's not that we don't have variety and that we don't feel the moment. We're often very immersed. Not every ritual is a winner, but most of them are. The structure lens of familiarity, and from that familiarity you get peace. It's the same as wearing your favorite comfy pajamas or slipping into just the right pair of socks. You know that whatever else is coming you can handle because you have an idea of where things are going. You know you're going to be comfy in those socks. I know I'm going to be comfy in this ritual.
Well, and the thing is with being on time, it's still free. We're just choosing our freedom to respect other people's time.
Yeah, it's a mutual respect. It's definitely got to go.
Yeah.
Go both ways, for sure.
I like your comfy pajama analogy, but yeah, it's for me. It always just felt like that core order of ritual, like the thing of, those comfortable phrases, those pieces that are always there in every ritual. It gives you kind of a comfort to be more in the moment. You don't have to be like
focusing on your sheet,
trying to like rapidly catch up to where you are in the ritual, and if you're going to miss your part, and you can actually. That when somebody starts doing like the Earth Mother invocation, the phrase that's going to be said, when we say the "so say we all" in ritual, that there's a speak and respond that's expected. Mm-hmm. And it just gives us kind of comfort of familiarity, and it allows you to kind of fall into that moment. I remember both leading and participating in rituals where it's like, you finish the ritual the day before that you're going to be putting it on, and you're trying to like hastily prep everybody who's going to be involved, and then nobody actually reads their parts, and then everybody's on that day in that space. Anybody who's involved in the ritual is kind of taken out of the moment because they're just so busy trying to catch up with if they're doing it correctly or not.
There's a lot to be said for that habitual practice too. Some of those phrases and some of those sections, like you mentioned, we practically got them memorized. We've done them so many times, you don't even have to think about it. You just get to experience it. Mm-hmm. How often do you sit there and really focus on brushing your teeth? You know how to brush your teeth. Mm-hmm. And then when you're done, you just get to experience that clean mouth. That's great.
Oh, beloved mother of all, from whose starry womb the green earth springs, you who are the bearer of all life, we pray you bless and uphold this right. So say we all.
Yeah, so I think for myself, I found Druidry actually through shamanism. Early on, I think back in 2001, I stepped into Little Mysteries. I knew what I was looking for, but I didn't know what it was called. And it was either Amanda Smith or Vanessa Smith had directed me towards the shamanism section. I picked up Fire in the Head, and
that was a good title.
It's a good book.
Yeah.
And I ran with it, like to the point that I got to meet the author of Fire in the Head, and I got to go to a conference, and it was amazing. And I realized this isn't quite it. This is very close to what I want, but it's not what I'm looking for. And then I had read Sacred Balance by David Suzuki, and I said, this is what I want. This isn't a pagan book. Don't know what it's called. And so I went back to Little Mysteries, and they had directed me to Druidry. And the Druid section at Little Mysteries was rather small at the time. I don't remember the first Druid book. I'd have to look on my bookshelf. But on the important part of that was on the bulletin board was Druids of Nova Scotia meetup at the Superstore in Dartmouth by Mick Magnet. Yeah. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to that. So I went and I met Mike Farmer. He was running it. And that's where I met Mark Meadows. And I met Scott Petty. And I think we had like 2 or 3 meetings. And we went on a hike. But it didn't seem like it was an organized... It didn't seem like it was a group that really had any goals. They didn't have any long-term plans. They just wanted to meet up every once in a while, and that was sort of it. I said to myself, I wanted more. I went to APEG. That was my first time going to APEG. And me, Mark, Allie... Oh my goodness, I'm going to feel terrible. I can't remember. There was another gentleman's name. And we sat around the fire, and that's when we created the Order of Nova Scotia Druids, and we wanted to be an organization that did something. And so we did that, and it was great. You, Michael, was actually one of our first joined members.
Oh, yeah.
You were a little child.
I was a young man.
And you just really enjoyed singing in the tunnels at York Redoubt.
That too, yeah. And also, spiritual practice of Druidism, but sure.
And you kept telling us stories about building a castle.
Yes.
I feel like these were all initiatives that came up post-Bardic.
Post-Bardic.
Oh yeah, after a lot of drinking.
Oh yes, yeah. This was
We're
around.
We're gonna do something. We're gonna be different.
This was around Mark's giant mini camper condo.
Have you guys talked about that? Have you talked about the condo?
No, I've been trying to I want to get Mark on because I need Mark to explain the condo.
That's entirely fair.
That's totally fair.
Mark knew glamping before glamping was a term.
Yeah. He had a military tent that had multiple rooms.
Yes.
A queen
Full
size
kitchen.
bed, full kitchen. And this was in tent form. So yeah, and then the order continued.
I joined for a couple of meetings, but I was still a teenager,
Yeah, you
and
were
I had to
living
get my mom to drive me to the city,
so it
to the big
wasn't-
city, to go talk to a bunch of people calling themselves Druid in a coffee shop. I don't understand how I convinced my mother to take
But
part
your
in
mom
this.
Your mom is still wonderful to this day.
That would be the same way that I convinced my parents that 14-year-old Karen could go to the valley and camp with a bunch of heathens.
Yeah.
Definitely similar conversations.
Yes. No,
Yeah,
fair.
and then the order continued on for a while. Dan eventually joined, and then we took a break for a little bit. We had I think it was like a 2-year break. We were members of ADF at that point, and when we came back after that 2-year hiatus, ADF had added orders in its group, so we had to change our name, which always kind of annoyed me. And then we
I
became.
don't know. It's funny because I find order is such a pretentious word.
I think we were a little pretentious.
I
Back
guess,
then.
yeah.
I don't know. And then we became the Grove of Nova Scotia Druids, and here we are.
I like the word grove. I think it has a really good and really strong meaning. I think it's very appropriate. I like
Yeah,
grove.
well, for us, it very much represents family.
That's true.
This is our circle.
But also
family.
trees, and I hear those are important.
I don't know. What's a tree?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was. I found Druidry through shamanism and the community board at Little Mysteries.
Funny how we all kind of find the path by wandering.
All those who wander are not lost.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of has their little "I wandered here, I wandered there, I found my place" story. It's pretty cut and dry, and once you find it, and you know where you are, and it's interesting because there's so many things. I'm a huge advocate for people being made up of many different parts, and that certain parts don't serve you at different times. But Druidry and paganism as a whole has been something that's served me as one of the largest and longest pillars in my house and in my life. So.
Same.
It's not, not to say that certain things will and won't serve you well at different times, but I feel like I've just found my place and this is where I'm going to stay.
One of the things I always kind of prided myself on was the fact that I always had a permanent home shrine in every apartment, every home that I've lived in since I moved out of my parents' house. Like that I may not have maintained a daily practice every day or every year, but I always kept a home shrine. I always kept an altar that was active that I would always come to at least for high days or at least sporadically to sit down and meditate or pray or something. But I've been actually as part of the Druid Path stuff, I was trying to go back and find, I thought I had a folder with old photos from my different altar setups and my different homes. That was kind of neat to go through a couple of those, but I don't have all of them, but I have a couple and it's kind of neat. Everything from, my current much more elaborate setup to back in the beginning, I had a couple of cinder blocks with a cloth over top of it.
Oh wow! Actually, it's funny now that you say that. It sparked a memory. I had a box that I hid. So it
of
was
course.
a tiny. I mean, I didn't say tiny. It was a fair-sized box, but it was still a tiny altar with mini altar pieces because I was raised Roman Catholic. I was baptized. I sang in the church choir. We went every Sunday. I did the pancake breakfast. Just never felt right. And my mom at one point had said, and I kept telling her, this is not for me. This is not what, I don't believe these things. This doesn't work for me. And she said to me, well, you go ahead and you get confirmed. And once you're confirmed, you can make your own choices. So I think you get confirmed at 12. Yeah, so
you dedicate your life to Christ, and then you can make your own choices.
And it's unfortunate, but I mean, she, to be fair, she felt she was doing the right thing, and had hoped that this was a phase that I would come in and out of. But I did the thing. I went. I walked up. I did the stuff, and then I said, "Okay, Mom, deal's a deal." And she said, "Yeah, yes, it is." And I don't think it was a week before I had gone down to Little Mysteries, picked up Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. I guarantee you we've all read that.
Yeah.
I very carefully and surgically cut out the chapter on sex and I gave it to my mom, hoping
you
that
gave it to her.
I gave it to her, hoping
After cutting
that
out the sex chapter.
yes,
Yeah.
very important factor.
Okay.
I gave it to her, hoping that she would, help me to engage and would understand why I had exploring other religions. And I think at that time I was probably 13 or so, which still, now that I'm thinking about it, really, I took the bus all the way into town, or from Bedford all the way to Little Mysteries, walked into the little occult shop, grabbed the book with my pennies, and went back home. It obviously meant a lot to me even then.
No, you see that reminds me of like my parents catching me, after like making the runes and just being so upset because I don't even remember what the book was. No, I do. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Wicca and Witchcraft.
I'm so proud of you right now.
I know, right? It
Wow.
was hilarious looking back on that, but it was actually a fairly good resource.
I mean, it's funny because The Idiot's Guide to Paganism is on the Dedicant, and it's honestly one of the better books I read.
Some of those books are real bad, though.
But I
Real bad.
remember like we had created that first set of runes and it suggested like symbolic of blood, like painting the back of those runes red. And my parents finding that and just like wondering or like asking if I had gotten into devil worship and the whole 9 yards. And I remember borrowing that book from Tyler to show to them, to be like, okay, like let's read through this. I can show you, like, this isn't, it may sound weird, but it's not evil. Like, yeah, it was a different experience.
I think one of my favorite stories from you, Brian, was when you told your mom.
Oh, yes.
And what did she say to you?
So when I told my mom, we were driving through Victoria Park and PEI, we were talking about religion. And my family has never been a religious family. I was never baptized. I remember going to Sunday school when I was younger, mostly because my mother, I think, wanted us to experience it and choose for ourselves. And we decided it wasn't for us, and that was fine. And I think she was more than happy not to have to go to church on Sundays. And she said, well, what religion are you? Are you a religion? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a pagan. I follow a Druid Path. And she got really quiet and said, that's not what Tom Cruise is into, right? And I said, no, that's Scientology. And she's like, okay, as long as it's not that, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But she was very concerned for a while I was a Scientologist. Just for a split second.
Yeah, I had kind of a similar like upbringing. Like we never went to church. Mom was a Catholic. Dad was raised Protestant. Mom was raised Catholic. So when they married, they said we're not doing any of the religious stuff. Yeah, they just tried to focus on being a good person. And I think I went to church a few times, or some kind of Sunday school kind of things with one of my babysitters when I was a kid. I never really felt part of that. And I remember growing up and just feeling really I would always get a weird feeling going into a church, just felt uncomfortable. I just wasn't wanted there. It was a really strong, there's certain churches that I've walked into that I get a sense, I get a feeling of something there. And it's this is not good mojo. This does not want me here.
I don't think I've ever experienced that because I've always been, and this is going to be a terrible thing to say, I've always viewed a church as something Mother Guys is going to consume eventually.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible.
That is not where I expected that to go.
It's not at all where I
How
expected
many
that to go.
times have we walked through abandoned churches?
A lot of
Oh, yeah, a lot of it.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I think those are the most peaceful places, the places where Mother Nature is just taking everything back.
Yeah.
I've always had this fantasy of us someday finding land, and on that land is an old abandoned brick church that's just sort of being reclaimed by Mother Nature. I don't know why, but yeah, I just love that concept.
Well, this was fun.
Well, good. So this was our first test run with our new equipment. I'm sure it'll sound excellent. And we thank you for listening. And thank you, Michael and Karen, for joining me on this test run. And if you want to find us, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook under 3 Witches and a Druid. If you would really like to support us and possibly purchase our poor video editor coffee, you can support us at patreon.com/3 Witches and a Druid. And I think we're up to possibly purchasing her one double at Tim Hortons. I think we can do a little bit better.
3 Witches and a Druid podcast would like to take a moment to thank our amazing Patreon supporters. Today, we shout out to Danny, Tania, Sarah, Lore, Kay, Linda, and Jennifer. Without your generous support and contributions, we couldn't bring you this magical content, and we thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Merry meet.
Merry part.
And merry meet again. Blessed be.
This has been 3 Witches and a Druid podcast. Thanks for listening.